the power gen side, again, Alstom in the country has a unique position, again, bringing in technology. You probably know, post 2006, the Planning Commission and the Government of India decided in a majority way that the future power plants of the country should be supercritical and ultra super. We are not yet in the ultra super, but already in supercritical, which is 660 megawatt plants. And that simply means that the power plants would be having gross thermal efficiency of something like 43 or 45% compared to, in the subcritical range, 30%. So that's a 50% jump in efficiency, which means that you will have less pollution, you will be emitting less pollution because you'll be anyway burning the same fuel, which is coal. And in this process with BHL, Mr. BP Rao heads BHL, so we have a license agreement where for the boilers, for the supercritical, Alstom transferred the technology to BHL. So since then, a significant part of the boiler fleet of supercritical is with BHL Alstom joint efforts. On the turbine side, again, similarly on the supercritical turbine, Alstom is building a factory in Gujarat and Sanand, which will produce 660 megawatt turbines. If we go ahead and look ahead, we would say that in the entire power sector, we have a strong support from organizations like NTPC Power Grid, who lead the way to allow a domestic manufacturing. I mean, we are, of course, a multinational company, but since 1911 that we operate in the country, we lost that flavor that we are a multinational. We are actually an Indian company. We have 14 manufacturing factories. Each of these factories are world-class. That means that if you go to Europe or in the Western world, and if you visit any of our factories, you will see no difference, and probably you will see a better factory because these have been built recently. And with these 14 manufacturing plants, we cover the entire spectrum of power, which is in the coal, which you call thermal side. We are also in the renewable, which involves the hydro generation. In the grid side, in the transmission and distribution domain, right from 66 kV, which is the sub-transmission voltage, up to ultra high voltage, which is 1200 kV, we are present with manufacturing capability in the country. For example, just to give you a scale, today India's electrical grid in the last 5 years is getting into a backbone voltage of 765 kV. For the last 20 years, it was operating at a 400 kV. But then with the induction of or increase of power generation capability of, let's say, 130 gigawatt, which was there in 2006-07, we have added another 125 gigawatt. Almost 90% have been added in the last 7 years. And that kind of power flow cannot be managed anymore in the 400 kV voltage. So the grid today, electrical grid today, is at 765 kV or extra high voltage level. In the next 5 to 7 years, I would say by 2020, India's electrical grid will be at 1200 kV level. So that is going to be called ultra high voltage. We have already produced 3 equipments for ultra high voltage in a test substation organized by Power Grid at Bina, and where we have our disconnectors of 1200 kV, our substation automation, and also the capacitive voltage transformer of the 1200 kV. That means India today is ready and capable for the next generation of technology, which is going to be commercialized in this country by, say, 2022. Similarly, if we look at NTPC, the gigantic growth that we have seen in NTPC is phenomenal. I mean, I'm always extremely proud to say that I'm a graduate of NTPC, because my first nascent years after graduating from Engineering Institute I've spent in 5 years, and whatever I've learned in the first 5 years, in fact, I'm living on that, literally to say. And today in NTPC, today it's a 45 gigawatt power generating station, so the top leading generating company with an extremely visionary plan. They would be by 2017 something like 70 gigawatt. They would like to be 128 gigawatt by 2032. By that time, India would be around 780 gigawatt. So it's a phenomenal growth, and again, NTPC is leading the way in encouraging domestic manufacturing of the power generation equipments, and that's how India brought in the supercritical technology and graduating towards the ultra supercritical technology. On the closing remarks, I would say that in the next 5 to 10 years, India is going to see a huge amount of renewables getting injected to the grid. Renewables, I mean hydro, solar and wind. Let's talk more of solar and wind. Solar and wind have got a high visibility in the current government, and in Alstom, we're looking forward to it. Solar and wind both are intermittent power. That means you can only have power generation when you have solar, sun, or you will have wind. So therefore, the grid gets polluted with power which quality is poor and predictability is a questionable item. So therefore, in Alstom, we have the software technology to predict. We can predict for 1 to 2 years ahead of time, thanks to the meteorological technology that we have. And we have the technology to compensate the power so that, the grid, the stable grid that India has today doesn't get polluted. So on that note, I will close and thank you very much, and I will be very happy to take questions later on if you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Basu, for taking another aspect of the electricity sector to the audience. Again, just for the audience, you can write your name. You're sitting on the left side or the right side of the podium, and the name of the speaker to whom you want to ask the question, send it across. It'll be very easy for me to organize. Now, there are two things which is happening. One is the session was opened by a Bitosa member. It's going to be closed by a Bitosa member. And second, we are moving away from the electricity sector, lest you feel that since Chairman NTPC is chairing the session, you only are talking of manufacturing of electricity equipments and the transmission. So we have Arup Jutsi, who's come all the way from the US to be with you, to enlighten you on another dimension of how to make in India. Mr. Arup Jutsi.
Good morning, friends. It is my honor and privilege to be here today among all BITians, and hopefully as we meet later in the day, I hope to meet and exchange some of the things that we used to do back in BIT days. But since the time is limited, let me dive and give a perspective very different, because I'm obviously not from the manufacturing sector, even though I did mechanical engineering, but I am an industry observer from the kind of work we do as a company. So what does that mean? Make in India, made in India. I think both are very appropriate, I think overdue, and I'm very glad we finally have a leader in this country who has made this a big, big charter moving forward. But obviously with this comes incredible challenges, but also incredible opportunities. We know as a country, we do not have what I call as the hard infrastructure. We know that we don't have the speed of what I call a soft infrastructure. China is always going to be there. Comparisons with China are good, but the fact remains, China is not 10 years ahead of us. China is not 20 years ahead of us. I believe China is a full 50 years ahead of us. And to break that infrastructure is not going to be easy, because they have the ability with the ecosystems that they have created that they can overcome any major challenge and threat to their manufacturing base. Likewise, China is not the only country in the world that is looking to manufacturing. There are more than 40 countries in the world that are aggressively pursuing manufacturing as a very important part of their strategy, because every country faces the same challenge like India. And for example, everybody wants to get their economy growing. It's a big agenda in every government's policy. Number two, they want to create jobs for their people. They want to increase the employability of their people, which is skill development. So this is common across everybody. Countries that are moving ahead very aggressively are countries like Mexico, for example. After almost 12 years of NAFTA being in place, we now have NAFTA that is really making a difference. Finally, there are a lot of companies shifting their manufacturing bases from countries like China and other parts of the world to places like Mexico because of tremendous access to US market. So while we all know there are incredible challenges and more countries are going to compete with us. So it's not just China, there are going to be a lot more competing with us, and I can share with you the list of countries that we work with globally who are doing exactly what we plan to do. But I think I remain tremendously optimistic. I would use the word cautiously optimistic, but definitely optimistic. And the reason why I believe that is because what I find is technology is not only an enabler, but a significant disruptor. And where we have excelled as a country is in the space of technology. And where we will need to work in the future will be to leverage technology. We operate in an emerging market.